Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to yet another video. Now today we are back with the championship content. And what we're going to do today is a little bit different. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through all of the championship teams. We're going to be ranking their best rivalry in a bit of a tier list. Let's get into this. So then guys, let's just explain this before we get into it. At the bottom, as you can see, there's plenty of games down there. That is basically each of the championship teams and their fiercest rivalry. And then as you can see above that, we've got 5 tiers. We've got poor at the bottom, average just above that, underrated above that, solid rivals above that, and hatred at the top. And we're going to be putting all of these fixtures into one of those tiers. Just before we get into this guys, it is worth pointing out I have gone on the GMS website to find out who each of their fiercest rivals are. I know some of you might disagree with who your fiercest rivals are because there's some clubs that have a few rivals, but I've selected one rival for each of you, and yeah, let's get into this. So then, we'll start in alphabetical order. We have AFC Bournemouth, and their fiercest rival is also on the south coast. It's Southampton. Now, obviously, they did lock horns quite a lot when they were both in the Premier League for about 5 or 6 years. Obviously, Bournemouth have been relegated. They might get up and be playing them again next year. As for the rivalry itself, I don't get all too excited for this one. I think Southampton's main rivals are Portsmouth. So for me, I just don't think this is an exciting rivalry. I don't think it's a terrible one, but I'm going to put Bournemouth versus Southampton in average. I think it's a bit frustrating for Bournemouth fans because obviously Southampton's fans will have their eyes prioritised on Portsmouth. So for me, that's an average rivalry. Next up then we have Barnsley versus Sheffield Wednesday. Now obviously Sheffield Wednesday's main rivals is Sheffield United, but Barnsley's is apparently Sheffield Wednesday. And they do have good games when they do lock horns. I think when there's fans in the stadiums, this can be a good one. Where am I going to put it? Do you know what? I think this is quite an underrated one. I know some people will rate it already, but I think some fans don't appreciate how good that one can be. I think Barnsley versus Sheffield Wednesday, like I say, when there's fans in there, it can be a decent one. Obviously, they won't be playing next season because Sheffield Wednesday have been relegated, but I think that's a decent rivalry. Next up then we have Birmingham versus Aston Villa, and for me this is one of the easiest. That's going all the way up in hatred. Now one of the downsides of it is usually quite a one-sided rivalry. I don't think Birmingham get too many victories over Villa, not in recent years anyway. Obviously Villa have been in the Premier League for the last couple of years, but they were in the Championship and they did lock horns, and obviously we had that Jack Grealish incident when a Birmingham fan ran onto the pitch and punched him, and if that doesn't say hatred, what does? So that one is going to go straight into hatred. Next up we've got Blackburn Rovers versus Burnley. Not sure about this one. To be honest, because I live in the Midlands, I don't know all too much about some of the rivalries up north. Obviously it's a Lancashire derby. I'm just going to put it in solid rivals. I don't know all too much about it, but I have heard it's quite a good one. I think Blackburn and Burnley, they don't play quite regularly because obviously they're both in different leagues, but when they do play, I think it can be a good one, so I'm going to put that in solid rivals. Next up then we have Brentford versus Queen's Park Rangers. This is obviously a West London derby. Now because they are both in London, they do have plenty of other rivals. I don't get all too excited for this one, and I'm sorry Brentford and QPR fans, but I'm going to put this in poor. I just don't think it's that amazing. I suppose it could be average, but just because they're not bitter rivals, I'm just going to put it in poor. Once again, up until a few years ago, it wasn't until Brentford got into the Championship that these two were playing quite regularly. So I don't think it's an amazing one. I'm going to put it in poor. Now next up, we've got the Bristol derby, Bristol City versus Bristol Rovers. This is a tough one. Obviously, they don't play very often because they are quite a few leagues apart. Bristol Rovers have just been relegated to League 2. I'm going to put it in underrated. I can't really put it in solid rivals just because they don't play very often. I suppose it could be a solid rivalry if I'd have seen them play, but I can't remember the last time they did play. It was probably in like the Johnston Paint Trophy or the League Cup or something. So I'm going to put it underrated. I would like to see them play each other because I'm sure it is a good derby when they do play. Next up then we've got the Welsh derby, Swansea City versus Cardiff City. Some people aren't too mad on this one, but I think it's a decent derby. It's obviously the two biggest clubs in Wales going head to head. And as far as the Championship goes, it's not a bad one. I'm going to put it in solid rivals. I think Swansea versus Cardiff, it's not a bad rivalry in my opinion. I think, yeah, it's not bad. It's not the best in my opinion, but it's not too bad either. Now next up we have my team, Coventry City. Now we have a few rivals. We don't really have a direct one. Some Coventry fans would say it's Aston Villa. Some Coventry fans would say it's Leicester. I've gone with Leicester because that's what the GMS website has gone for. Obviously Villa's main rivals are Birmingham. Coventry-Leicester, I'm going to put it underrated. I have been to a Coventry-Leicester game, but that was about 10 years ago, and I think a lot of people watching this wouldn't really realise that Coventry and Leicester are rivals. Like I say, it's not the best rivalry, but it is the M69 derby. It's not the worst one in the world. Obviously, we haven't played each other in quite a few years because Coventry have been languishing in the lower divisions. Meanwhile, Leicester City have been in the Premier League, winning the Premier League and the FA Cup. So it will be good when we do play each other again, but who knows when that'll be. Now, next up, we have the East Midlands derby. This has got to be in the top tier, hasn't it? Derby versus Forest. Once again, there is one or two minors for me that would take points off this one. I think the fact that they've both been in the Championship for so long, it can become a bit stale when you're playing each other every season. But you could also reverse that argument and say it means they're playing each other quite a lot, and that means the hatred is still there. I don't know. I personally think when two rivals haven't played in a long time and then they come together, that's when a rivalry is really good. But it's still a very solid rivalry, Derby versus Forest. So yeah, I'll put that in hatred. We'll move down to Huddersfield Town, who apparently their biggest rivals is Leeds United. This is obviously a Yorkshire derby. I don't know all too much about this one. I feel like Leeds United are rivals with everyone. So what I'll do is I'll put it in average. I don't know all too much about it, Huddersfield fans. It probably is a decent derby, but just because I don't realise how good it is, I'm just going to put it in average. Obviously, Huddersfield fans will probably get excited for that one, but I feel like if I was a Leeds fan, there's so many other games to get excited for that it's an average derby for me. Now, next up we have Luton Town versus Watford. This is a good one. Do you know what? I'm going to put this in solid rivals. I think this is a real solid rivalry. Obviously, they haven't played each other in ages coming up to this season. Obviously, they did play this season, but there was no fans there. I think Watford won the game at Vicarage Road and Luton won the game at Kenilworth Road. So, they are decent rivals, and yeah, I'll put that in solid rivalry. Now, next up, we have Middlesbrough, whose biggest rival is Sunderland. Do you know what? I'm going to put it in average. I'm sorry, but I think when you've got a club like Sunderland, whose biggest rivals are Newcastle, I just don't think they'd be massively interested in this game. I suppose they might be, because Middlesbrough and Sunderland, there isn't all too much distance in it. But it's a bit of a frustrating one for me, because like I say, Sunderland have got Newcastle. I'll put it in average, because I just don't know too much about that one. Now, next up, we've got West Ham versus Millwall. For me, this just has to be in hatred. I won't put too many in hatred, because for me, hatred is like the sacred tier for the best ones. And yeah, West Ham Millwall definitely gets in there. Obviously, they haven't played in quite a few years, actually, because Millwall have been in the Championship for the last few years. West Ham have been in the Premier League for, I think, about 10 years now. So they haven't locked horns, but when they have, in the last 10, 15 years, it usually is good, and there usually is trouble. And that's why you've got to put it in hatred. When the fans are spilling onto the pitch and that kind of stuff, when there's violence outside the stadium, that's when it's a hatred. Now, next up, we've got Norwich versus Ipswich. This is the East Anglia derby. I'm going to put it in solid rivals. It's not a bad one, to be honest. They were locking horns quite regularly when they were both in the Championship. Obviously, Ipswich are down in League One, and Norwich are now battling more in the Premier League than the Championship. But yeah, it's not a bad rivalry. I think it is a decent one when they do play. Obviously, both sets of fans will get excited for that. So yeah, I'll put it in solid rivals. Next up, we've got Preston versus Blackpool. Now, I don't know too much about this one. I don't think they've played in quite a few years. If Blackpool get promoted through the playoffs, obviously they'll be playing in the Championship next year. But I just don't know much about it. So I'm going to put it in underrated. Like I say, I just don't know too much about it. So I'll put Preston Blackpool in underrated. It'll be interesting to see when they do play what happens, how much the stadium will fill and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one when it does come around. Next up, we've got Reading versus Swindon, and to be honest, I didn't know they were rivals. When I looked at Reading, it said their biggest rivals were Swindon and Oxford, so I can't really say I get too excited when they play either of them. I suppose if you're a Reading fan, you'd know more about it than me, but just because I don't get too excited when Reading plays Swindon, I'm going to put it in poor. Plus, I don't think they've played each other in quite a while, because Swindon, when was the last time they were in the Premier League or Championship? A long time ago, I'd imagine, so I'm putting that one in poor. Now, next up, we've got Rotherham United, whose biggest rival is Doncaster. I didn't really know that. I know they're both in Yorkshire, but I can't say I'm usually too excited when these two play each other. Obviously, they do play each other quite regularly because they're both usually bouncing between the Championship and League One. So, what I'll do is I'll put that one in average. I just feel like I don't know enough about it, but I'm sure it's an okay derby. So, yeah, average for me. Next up, I think this is going to be the last one I'm going to pop in hatred, is Sheffield United versus Sheffield Wednesday. It is just a classic, isn't it? The Steel City derby. I'd imagine it's pretty tense in the city of Sheffield when this game is going on. Obviously, it's derby day, and they did lock horns a few years ago when they were both in the Championship, and they did have a couple of good games. I think Sheffield United beat them 4-2 at Hillsborough. That must have been a pretty crazy game. Obviously, they won't be playing next season because Sheffield Wednesday have been relegated, although Sheffield United are coming down, Sheffield Wednesday going down at the same time, so Sheffield United will be in the Championship, Sheffield Wednesday will be in League One, but when they do play again in the future, it'll be a good one. Next up, we have Stoke City versus Port Vale. Obviously, there's quite a local one for both. I can't say I know too much about this. Port Vale haven't been in the Premier League. They haven't been in the Championship in my lifetime, or not that I can remember. So I don't think they play very regularly. But I do know the Port Vale fans are pretty crazy, and I think the Stoke City fans are pretty passionate. So what I'll do is I'll pop this one in underrated. It'll be interesting when they play each other again. I want to see what comes of it. I want to see what those two will serve up. And the last one we've got is Wycombe Wanderers, who've obviously been relegated from the Championship. Their biggest rival is Colchester. I didn't know that. I'm really surprised by that. I didn't think that. I think that's quite a fair distance as well, Wycombe to Colchester. Maybe there's more to this than I know, but I'm just going to pop it in Port. I can't say I get too excited about Wycombe versus Colchester. Maybe I just don't know much about it, but I can't say it's the best rivalry in there. So then, guys, that wraps up my tier list for all of the Championship teams' biggest rivalries. What do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. If you disagree, that's fine. Just let me know down below. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe if you're new. We'll see you in the next video. Peace out.